At dawn, long before the sun cleared the pale limestone hills, the cities of Judea were already awake. Roosters crowed from cramped courtyards, donkeys snorted as they were loaded for market, and the smell of smoke from cooking fires clung to the cool air. Life in the cities during the time of Jesus was not quiet, peaceful, or simple in the way it is often imagined. It was crowded, tense, noisy, and shaped by faith, fear, Roman authority, and relentless survival. To understand how people lived then, one must step into their streets, feel the dust beneath bare feet, hear the clash of languages, and sense the weight of power pressing down from above. Jerusalem was the heart of everything. It was not the largest city in the Roman world, but to the Jewish people it was the center of the universe. Pilgrims spoke of it with reverence, and many dreamed of seeing it at least once before death. From a distance, the city seemed almost unreal. Its white stone walls glowing in the sun, the massive Temple Mount dominating the skyline. But inside the walls, Jerusalem was crowded and harsh, a city stretched beyond its limits by constant waves of visitors, especially during major festivals like Passover. The streets of Jerusalem were narrow and uneven, paved in some places, dirt-packed in others. Sewage often ran in shallow channels or simply pooled where it fell. Flies swarmed in the warmer months, feeding on refuse thrown into the streets. Houses were packed tightly together, built of stone and mud mortar, often rising 2 stories high. Many families lived in single rooms, sharing space with animals at night for warmth and protection. Privacy was rare. Sound traveled easily through thin walls, and the cries of children, arguments between neighbors, and prayers spoken aloud blended into a constant urban hum. Jerusalem depended on cisterns, aqueducts, and reservoirs to survive. Rainwater was collected from rooftops and stored underground. Drawing water was daily labor, usually done by women or servants, who carried heavy jars through crowded streets. Clean water was never guaranteed, and disease was common. Illness was often interpreted as spiritual impurity or divine punishment, adding shame to suffering. The temple dominated life in Jerusalem, not only physically, but emotionally and economically. Its vast courtyards were filled from sunrise to sunset with worshippers, priests, Levites, merchants, money changers, and animals destined for sacrifice. The smell of blood and burning flesh was constant. Sheep bleated, oxen bellowed, and doves fluttered in cages. Pilgrims brought coins bearing Roman images, which had to be exchanged for temple currency, enriching the priestly elite. For many, the temple was a place of hope and forgiveness. For others, it was a symbol of corruption and exploitation. Roman soldiers were a permanent presence in Jerusalem. They watched from towers, patrolled streets, and stood guard during festivals when rebellion was most likely. Their armor gleamed, their helmets crested, their discipline intimidating. They spoke Latin among themselves, Greek to officials, and broken Aramaic when dealing with locals. To the Jewish population, they were a reminder of humiliation and foreign domination. Taxes were heavy, collected by local agents working for Rome, and failure to pay could mean imprisonment, confiscation of property, or worse. Daily work in Jerusalem was exhausting and uncertain. Craftsmen labored in small workshops, potters shaping clay, metal workers hammering tools, carpenters carving beams and yokes. Bakers rose before dawn to prepare bread in communal ovens. Fishermen from the Sea of Galilee sold dried fish in the markets. Spices, grain, olives, wine, and figs were traded loudly, prices argued fiercely. Beggars lined the streets, many blind or crippled, calling out for alms, believing charity might earn spiritual merit for the giver. Religion shaped every aspect of urban life. The Sabbath transformed the city each week, slowing activity as work ceased, lamps were lit, and families gathered to eat, pray, and recite scripture. Purity laws governed food, touch, and daily behavior. A person could become ritually unclean simply by brushing against the wrong object or individual. This created invisible boundaries within the city, separating the healthy from the sick, the righteous from the sinners, the insiders from the outcasts. Outside Jerusalem, the road to Jericho descended steeply through barren wilderness. Jericho itself felt like another world. While Jerusalem sat high and cool, Jericho lay deep below sea level, hot and lush, surrounded by palm trees, date groves, and balsam plantations. It was known as a city of wealth and pleasure, a resort for priests and elites escaping Jerusalem's cold winters. The air was heavy with sweetness from ripening fruit, and the contrast between the two cities could not have been sharper. Jericho's streets were wider, its houses more spacious, especially in wealthy quarters. Large estates surrounded the city, owned by aristocrats who rarely worked the land themselves. Slaves and hired laborers tended the groves, harvesting dates under the burning sun. Irrigation channels brought water from nearby springs, making Jericho one of the most fertile places in the region. Life here revolved around agriculture, trade, and Roman administration. Tax collectors were especially active in Jericho. Because of its trade routes and agricultural wealth, it was a prime location for revenue. These men were despised, not only for working with Rome, but for enriching themselves through corruption. They lived comfortably, while their neighbors struggled. Social divisions were sharp. Wealthy homes featured courtyards, frescoed walls, and imported goods, while the poor lived in cramped dwellings at the city's edge. Markets in Jericho, vibrant and loud. Traders from across Judea and beyond passed through, bringing goods from Arabia, Egypt, and Syria. Camels knelt as they were unloaded. The smell of spices mixed with sweat and animal dung. Bargaining was aggressive, often accompanied by insults and laughter. Greek was commonly spoken alongside Aramaic, reflecting Jericho's cosmopolitan character. Despite its prosperity, Jericho was not free from fear. Banditry was common on the roads leading to and from the city. Travelers moved in groups when possible, wary of ambushes in the rocky terrain. Roman patrols attempted to maintain order, but justice often favored those with money or influence. The poor relied on community support and religious charity to survive. Nazareth, by contrast, was barely a city at all. It was a small village tucked into the hills of Galilee, largely ignored by the powerful. Life there was quieter, but no less difficult. Houses were simple, often carved partially into rock, with stone walls and thatched roofs. Most families worked the land, growing grain, olives, and grapes, or practiced trades like carpentry and stonework. Days began at sunrise and ended with darkness, as oil lamps were expensive and dim. In Nazareth, everyone knew everyone. Reputation mattered. Honor and shame shaped social interactions, and gossip traveled fast. A person's worth was tied to family, obedience to tradition, and adherence to religious law. Opportunities were limited. Many young men left seasonally to find work in nearby towns or construction projects, including the growing city of Sepphoris, not far away. Food in Nazareth was plain but sustaining. Bread, lentils, olives, and occasional fish formed the basis of most meals. Meat was rare, eaten mainly during festivals or celebrations. Hunger was a constant threat, especially after poor harvests. Families stored grain carefully, knowing a single bad season could mean disaster. Religious life in Nazareth centered on the synagogue, a modest building where scripture was read and discussed. Education was oral, based on memorization and debate. Most people could not read, but they knew the stories of their ancestors by heart. Hope for divine intervention ran deep. Many believed God would soon act to free Israel from oppression and restore justice. Across all these places, life expectancy was short. Disease, childbirth complications, accidents, and violence claimed many lives. Children often died young. Those who survived into adulthood carried the marks of hard labor on their bodies. Teeth were worn, joints stiff, skin scarred. Life was fragile, and faith provided meaning in the face of constant uncertainty. Women's lives were especially constrained. Their roles centered on home, childbearing, and food preparation. They married young and were expected to produce sons. Their legal rights were limited, and their voices rarely heard in public. Yet they were the backbone of daily survival, managing households, preserving food, drawing water, and passing traditions to the next generation. The presence of Rome loomed everywhere. Coins bore the image of the emperor, a constant reminder of foreign rule. Roman law could override local custom at any moment. Executions were public, designed to intimidate. Crucifixions were carried out along roads as warnings, bodies left to rot. Fear was part of the landscape, as real as the stones beneath one's feet. Yet amid all this hardship, life continued. Weddings were celebrated with music and wine. Children played in the streets. Neighbors gathered to share meals and stories. Hope flickered in prayers whispered at night. People listened eagerly to teachers and prophets who spoke of change, justice, and the coming of God's kingdom. This was the world in which Jesus lived and taught. Not a peaceful pastoral setting, but a tense, crowded, unequal society where survival demanded resilience and faith. Jerusalem with its splendor and corruption, Jericho with its wealth and exploitation, Nazareth with its obscurity and quiet endurance, all were bound together by shared traditions, shared suffering, and a longing for redemption. To walk through these cities during that time was to feel history pressing in from every side. The stones remembered footsteps, the streets echoed with prayers and curses, and every life was lived under the shadow of empire and the hope of something more.